that I'm going to stop sharing. Say hello to everyone. Um, I mean, I said it a moment ago, but I'll say it again just for the people who've joined. Thank you so much for joining us at the end of this Monday. First day back after the half term. And thank you for joining us for, what we believe to be a really fundamental and important discussion and debate. And I think this has come about particularly because we've seen a few conferences and events that have happened, and climate education has often been sidelined. It's been one of those issues that is marginalized. It's a sort of there's a small thread of it. We've all seen the enthusiasm around BET and lots of the technology and IT conferences associated with education, a real buzz, and a lot of people are sort of stood at the sidelines saying, "Why not climate? Why is there not the same energy and enthusiasm?" And so, yeah, we wanted to sort of confront that head on and sort of say, well, why? Why is it not mainstream? But also to take that a step further and to actually think, okay, well, what is it we can do? What is going on already? An important thread I think that will come through with today's discussion will be actually there's loads of great things happening, but how can we really amplify, bring them together, and build on the momentum of all those things in a way that will actually mainstream them rather than sort of see them as something that continues as a sort of marginal activity. Just also then to introduce myself, my name is Paul. I come from an organisation called the Ministry of Eco-Education. We're a charity supporting schools across the country to engage with climate and the nature crisis. I will just drop in the chat. There's a briefing document to give a bit more of an outline around the Ministry of Eco-Education. This event has only come about because of some other people from other organisations, and I'll just point to the Climate Majority Project, who have been a really key partner in helping to organise this, and also the team at the Education Climate Coalition, who again have really helped give direction to this and to come about with the speakers and all those sorts of things. We have a wonderful group of panelists who are going to be joining us, and I will introduce those as we go. We really hope that they represent a broad spectrum of people from across the education sector, so lots of different stakeholders. And I guess the thing that we really want to do with this as well is this isn't one online event and then it sort of disappears. We want this to be the start of a series of conversations. So we've got lots of other things in the pipeline of other people, other stakeholders and sectors within education who'll continue this conversation within their own groups. And then the idea is we're going to come back together potentially in September next. Sorry, it'll be this year, but next academic year, and sort of see how progress has how we've progressed and where we're at. So there'll be a kind of a conversation further on as well where we come back together. Yeah, and then there's going to be other moments throughout the year that we'll kind of point to again. I'm gonna now pass over to Professor Cham Gaj from UCL. And sorry, I just have to do some wizardry on Teams. I'm gonna bring him into the conversation to give a bit more of a context and a bit more of the background. So I'll hand over now, if that's all right.
Yeah, sure. Thanks, Paul. Hi, everyone. So yeah, I'm Tram from UCL. And I guess let me just start and just say where are we in, as I see it, where are we in education and climate change? Adaptation, resilience, necessary tools and training and so forth in the UK. And so as far as I can see, higher education is at the university level is getting it's sort of getting its act together. University movements from within, often, of course, starting with the students, but now with growing and meaningful institutional support. Mandatory courses are being brought in as universities also decarbonize their enterprises with sort of publicly stated commitments. And then there's also independent league tables popping up that are looking at sort of how credible a university is with regards to its sustainability and climate education, and to check greenwashing. And then research funding councils, all under sort of the banner of the UKRI now, the UKRI steer, that comes from DSIT, Department of Science, Innovation and Technology, is also moving. So it's requiring us as researchers, to have sustainability plans as part of our research proposals. Yeah, and looking at full scope 1 to 3 and working to decarbonize national facilities and also influence sort of international collaborations. Um, but schools are a different matter. So in my experience over the past decade, of new university students coming out of school or college, only a small percentage had any or have any real sort of understanding of climate change, and they often and those that do are often very distressed, right? And then for others to say what they learn in my own sort of climate and energy course at UCL, which is for third year undergraduate physics students, to say that it can be overwhelming would be an understatement. And so the need for supporting the mental health of students is all too clear, and a responsibility when delivering, this kind of information. And critically, at least, in my experience, and I've experimented much, it's only in doing this that the students feel safe enough to really allow themselves to be human for as long as it takes for them to sit, breathe, cry, or to talk through it, to open up to the reality of the here and now, where we are, and not just, with their heads. And then, right, and only then really punctuating the what feels like gloom, and letting in the information, the light, on the ready potential for large scale change to energy generation and consumption, extractive industries, food and water management systems, and all the positive action that's going on already, and where we need help. So this activates, it sort of activates active hope. And it helps them see where they can be of help, not specifically just yet, but they see they could do something should they want to, that they are valuable, from high granularity climate modeling, near unity efficient solar panel design, compact wind turbine for high elevation micro wind, so on, right? It also lets them realize they're not alone. It gives them the space and the safety to see, right, that there is support, there are people. Um, and they realize they're not alone, and it's not all on them to shoulder all this weight, because that's what it feels like at first, right? When you really understand climate change, it's like, oh my God. And that goes for all of us, I guess. We do this together, right? And but in doing so, it sort of changes the receptivity to the rest of the course, where the students learn what needs to be done is not technically insurmountable, far from it. And I only semi sort of jokingly say here, but the likes of Buckminster Fuller already had a plan or blueprint, right? All sort of laid out in the 50s, it seems. And I bring him up because he's a good example of how, irrespective of what happens politically, we have to get on and decarbonize, develop new systems, iterate, scale up, deploy, and all that rests on good education. And often it's not very long at all between the sort of depth of despair the students fall into and the emergence into hope. Certainly, within one term, they're much more capable in being able to engage and also do so much more authentically. And they even treat the course as more than the other, more than the others, more than other physics courses they're learning, um, and 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 certainly more significant than just another module they must pass to sort of end the year to get their degrees. Um, and so, like I had, and I suppose many here did, they've been longing to sort of find like-minded people, right? The tribe that says, yes, what you're saying is correct, this is serious, rather than left to feel alone, insane or utterly helpless, with a lot of pressure, of course. Um, and they're empowered when they see that not everyone is completely lost in the challenge, enormous though it is, right? That there's inner resilience work that's been done through humanity, that holds us now, continues today, can be strengthened, always can be taught. And I suppose, for me, above all, I want my students to be able to look after themselves as the climate change and everything that brings, even as we work, um, the impact that's going to have, right? The recognize the importance of themselves, their mental health, to this great mission. But they must gain access to the sort of ready and skilled professional support through that process. So, put another way, I reckon each and every one has sort of got lost in the grief for a bit before we're able to sort of reconfigure our brains through the morning, and then act with some wisdom and take up our responsibility, our sort of sacred duty here, especially crafted by the universe for us, here and now. But currently what we have at best, for our children, is some learning in school about sort of disparate issues, seemingly disconnected, but information by itself, like that, piles on helplessness, or it can be activated in sort of ineffectual ways, tending to more helplessness when that isn't sort of realized as a sort of nurturing further potential. Especially when the underlying issues become sort of apparent and the futility of what's being discussed in schools becomes clearer. And so, I'll stop in a few minutes, but let me just end with an example. And I know many of you have heard me say this, but it's recent. This was sort of last term with my daughter, who's a 9-year-old in a school. It's a very good school, and they do a lot. But she's learning about the deforestation of the Amazon rainforest. And they learn about that it's being chopped down and the impact, somewhat about the impacts, I guess, but not really. And then, they go, and she and a friend of hers raise some money, and they, save enough money and donate it to save a football-sized pitch. And so, but all through this, they're not taught why it's being cut down, right? Many of you already know this, of course, but the Amazon will trigger into a savanna state effectively about 25% deforestation, and we're at 20. And 75% of this is down to the soy that we grow to feed the 80 billion livestocks consumed by humanity each year. But that doesn't impact the school's choices, right, on the meals, on what they're educating, or what's going on. So you're kind of giving this problem, not letting that play out in the school, also showing what needs to be done, or understanding it. And that's so I don't know why the first thing any child is taught isn't that the power of the sun, and that we receive more sunlight on Earth in 1 hour than we need to power all of human activity across the globe for a year. But all right, so I see meetings like these, and people coming together in recognition that hope is a verb, right? Hope's a verb with its sleeves rolled up. And that all around the world, people are coming together in sort of ever-growing, sort of decentralized communities everywhere. Meetings that I can see, once they're grown sufficiently, they snap together as a youth, well educated, sort of come of age almost, and are able to reorder, reprioritize, and are guided with harmony, with the earth, how to live in harmony with the earth in terms of how it reconfigures. And so, can they learn this, and how does that happen? And I guess that's a rhetorical question, right? When did they ever not know that their planet, the trees, the rivers, the mountains, the bears, the eagles, elephants, lions, that they're all precious and magical and beautiful, and that we live with them? The question is then, can we tweak the education system such that rather than this be forgotten in the pursuit of knowledge that breeds belief in scarcity myths, ultimately fear and insane global behaviors, and the momentums of war, or can that be taught? Well, it doesn't need to be. It starts with ensuring that the schools prepare them, right? And that starts with us. So what are the barriers? Politics, inertia, power, money, taste buds, ignorance. Why hasn't it been done already? Because nobody's done it. What would be good steps, right? Where to begin? And for me, I'll drop one in where I'd love to see, say recommendations. So that's my time. Recommendations from the Climate Change Committee, for example, advising government on this matter. That would be a hard one to ignore, and help with the top-down push. But there are many such options, right? Pieces of the jigsaw that we're here to work on, and actions to be considered, as as I've done with the as Paul mentioned, and in the climate majority projects, climate courage campaign. So let's make space in the education system for the children to learn how to take care of their home. Addressing climate change, it can lead to incredible changes all across society. And I guess I'll end by just saying my prayer is that the children see us rising up together, right, to protect our planet and all who live on and through her. Because let's not forget that the children, how they learn best, right, is by seeing what their elders are doing. So thank you to the speakers for their time, and to all the organisers and everyone who's joined. I'm filled with gratitude at just how many of us there are here now together. So let's identify and dialogue on the barriers, and what we need to do to plot a skilled path to achieving appropriate education in the shortest time possible. So yeah, saying that, I think that's my time. So let's move on to I guess back to Paul. Thank you, everyone.
Yeah, thank you so much, Cham. I think that's a really good sort of perspective to really start from. I'm going to introduce now Dr. Alison Kitson, who leads or is part of the Climate Change and Sustainability Education Department at the IOE. Sorry, I'm just going to click another button and get Alison in on the call. Alison, I'll let you give a much better introduction to yourself, but thank you so much.
Thanks, Paul. I've just set my timer, so 5 minutes, yeah? So I'm Alison, and as Paul said, I help to run the UCL Centre for Climate Change Sustainability Education, and I also do a lot of work with new beginning teachers and more experienced teachers. So I'm going to come at this from a really practical point of view, and I've got 3 barriers. I'm sure other panellists will pick up. My first one is about the curriculum. A former colleague of mine at UCL described our school curriculum as a fossil curriculum. I think it's a fantastic phrase. And what he means by that is a curriculum that caters for a society whose whole economy is based around fossil fuels and in which human beings and the rest of the natural world are seen as entirely separate. Huge implications for us and for what a post-carbon curriculum might look like. So just imagine if a key premise of the curriculum was that humans are, in fact, part of the natural world. Think of the implications for that for history teachers and mathematics teachers and science teachers and art teachers and English teachers and, all the subjects on the curriculum. I'm a historian and began my career teaching history, and I don't think we really paid much attention to that at all, to be honest. So huge implications there. So we need to get away from a fossil curriculum. That's my first barrier. My second barrier is around teachers and support for teachers. So we're often told that there's space in the curriculum for teachers to innovate, and other people and the panel may want to say a bit more about that. But in order to have space to innovate and to bring in more focus on climate change and the nature crisis, teachers do need to have support. Now, we conducted a survey a couple of years ago, and nearly 1,000 teachers, primary and secondary, answered it, and less than 13% of teachers reported having covered these issues in their initial teacher training. A minority, and this is a fairly engaged cohort who bothered to complete the survey, right? A minority of them had engaged with formal professional development around climate change and sustainability. And the vast majority of the professional development reported was self-taught. So we've got, the good news is we've got a fantastic bunch of teachers, many of whom are on this call, who are passionate about these issues, who are going away, they're finding resources, they're trying to galvanize other colleagues. But we can't only rely on them. So for me, specifically, I want to see these issues as built in as a requirement in the teacher standards, in the core content framework for beginning teachers, in the early career framework for early career teachers, in the national professional qualifications, so that school leaders have to engage with these issues as well. So that's my third barrier. And my final barrier, I'm doing okay for time, my final barrier is that climate education can be unhelpfully compartmentalized, I think. It can be seen as a separate issue from other issues. So I'm going to give you 2 examples. One is that the current government, current Secretary of State for Education, and indeed those involved in the current review of the curriculum, identify social justice as a massive priority, which is great. They want to see the achievement gap reduced. That's not separate to climate education. We carried out a survey last year of 11 to 14-year-olds, and children from less advantaged backgrounds are less interested in the environment, have less access to nature, and are less likely to want to pursue a career in sustainability. Now, that has quite profound implications for them in their future life. So that is definitely part of the social justice agenda. My second example is around decolonising the curriculum. Lots of schools and teachers doing fantastic work around this. But of course, that's absolutely not separate from climate education. Efforts to decolonise the curriculum absolutely go hand in hand with understanding the inequitable impacts of the climate crisis around the globe. So it's all about connections, really, as Cham just said, it's connections across the curriculum. So those are my three barriers: a fossil curriculum, not enough support for teachers, and a danger of compartmentalising climate education too much.
Thank you so much, Alison. That was a really, really good and well done with your time management there. That's I'm sure that's years of practice there. I think already there's some really interesting themes coming through. And the thing that is in my head though as well is how much of this is a reflection of what's going on in broader society and how much of this is isolated in education and that role between the two and how can we come about with these things. Okay, we're going to move on then to our next speaker. Or panelist, sorry. We've got Jenna Crittenden from the Chartered College of Teaching. I'm just going to invite Jenna to join the conversation. There you are, Jenna.
Hello. Right, so yeah, I'm Jen. I work at the Chartered College of Teaching, but I was a primary teacher and a head teacher for 16 years up until 2 years ago, where I got the kind of exciting opportunity, I suppose, to lead a project called Rethinking Curriculum. And I'm hoping to be able to bring some of that knowledge to this evening in terms of what we've learned from the last 2 years research and why people aren't doing this. But I think I'll repeat a lot of what Alison said, probably with a slightly different angle from more of a from teacher angle. But I'm also a mum. I'm a mum of an 8-year-old, and I hear about this, as Cham was saying, the frustration I hear about what's happening, and it's not for want of they morally and they ethically they want to do it, but sometimes the barriers are stopping them. So hopefully a movement like this will enable teachers to kind of feel empowered to make those changes. So I've got 4 points. So I'm going one up on you, Alison. I'm going to go first at the one that everything can be blamed on in schools and every teacher will blame. And it is the accountability system and the measures that are currently seen as such high stakes. And I think this for teachers really makes them afraid. It makes them afraid to put things into the curriculum, but it also makes them afraid to remove things from a curriculum that potentially got them to a standard 5-6 years ago. And through Rethinking Curriculum, we studied in schools, we did lots of kind of case studies in schools, and it really was a fundamental barrier. And these are strong leaders that we worked with. These were empowered leaders, but they still felt this barrier to being able to make a change, especially if they were in the window, the dreaded window of inspection that happens. And I think if we are going to make any change or any focus, firstly, we have to recognise the fact that a cycle of window when we can make a change, a window when we can't make a change, and the fear of people coming to inspect us when we're in that window has to be changed. We have to do something around that. And then also, this is really important. And again, if we want to raise the profile of it, we're not saying go and inspect on it, but something around the fact that this innovation is happening or there is a focus on it needs to be there, because that is a way of ensuring that schools do this and ensuring that teachers feel they have the ability to do this and they're empowered to do this, and it's no longer a big gamble for them. My second point touches on what Alison was talking about the national curriculum. Until it is explicitly on the national curriculum, schools won't give it the big enough time. Teachers won't give it the time because they're currently in this world of, there's so much to cover. And we've had a period of kind of 15 years where more and more and more, you must do this and you must do that and you must do that. And teachers are feeling really overwhelmed by it, quite frankly. And so we need to acknowledge that there is actually very little on the curriculum, but because of the way it is is talked about, people have gone to schemes, and schemes are written by experts in their field, and there's nothing wrong with that. But everyone is an expert in their field, so everyone puts the maximum they can into the curriculum. Well, times that by the 10, 15 areas of curriculum, there isn't time. And that's not saying that it isn't important to keep that subject integrity, but subject integrity needs to be seen, as Alison was saying, with that kind of, it shouldn't be seen as decompartmentalised. It's got to be seen as a whole. And I think that would be another way of really kind of empowering and removing some of these myths, the myths that we all hear in, like, I'm a primary educator. You must teach English every morning. You must do maths every morning. They only do PE once a week. Nowhere does it tell us we have to do this. So actually just getting rid of some of these myths and re-empowering teachers and leaders to stand up and go, this is my curriculum. This is why I'm doing it. My third big barrier, I think, as we kind of both Cham and Alison alluded to, is that lack of knowledge. I said, as kind of within the curriculum, there is very tokenistic points. And as Alison said, that means quite often it's very tokenistically taught. The wider picture isn't there. And as Cham was referring to, sometimes we find about the result, we don't know about why. And that whole cycle needs to be there. And that can be due to lack of knowledge. And as Alison said, if we're going to make a difference, it needs to be on initial teacher training. It needs to be a big CPD drive. And it should be on every level of kind of teacher training, whether you have been training for 2 years or 30 years, everyone's got to be given the same platform to build from. And I think kind of linking to that is that, I can't apologise, I can't remember who referred to it, but often it's the teacher who's got a personal passion that's driving this in a school. So we can have 2 schools on the same road. One school's got a teacher who's passionate about it, therefore is leading the drive and is encouraging that change, but the school, the other end of the road, hasn't got anyone with that passion. It's making that kind of, that difference between the haves and the have-nots even broader. It's building that kind of social disparity in this area. So we need to have that. We need to kind of put it between. And I think the fourth one is a dream, but I'm going to dream. I was talking to a young person at a Fed event, and he was 17 and so despondent about what he'd just been through in terms of the education system, because he felt all he did for 5 years of secondary education was learn to pass exams. He wasn't taught that broader purpose of education. He wasn't taught the joy of learning and the skill set. He was super articulate. He'll be snapped up into a job. But actually his passion for learning had completely gone because he wasn't given those broader things. So I think we've got to do something about that. If the system needs to be driven, it's still got to have standards, but shouldn't be driven by the outcome. It should be driven by that process, and there's got to be more value to that process than what currently is there. We don't just educate for exam results, but currently that's the thing that we're measured upon. So there's got to be something about that holistic measurement that will enable things like climate and those challenges we have around it to really be given the time and importance. So yeah, that's my whistle-stop tour of change in the education system, Paul.
Well, thank you so much, Jen. I'm sure everyone on this call was nodding at each of those moments, thinking, "Yep, I've experienced that, or I know that, or that's something that we've been in a school and had that experience." And again, I think what's such a good strand is so much of this overlaps already. There's distinct things that are coming through on this. I'm also just going to take a moment to say we are actually joined by more than 100 people. The Zoom event, this itself, has a limit of 100 people, but this is also being streamed on a couple of other channels with, again, almost 100 people on. And I think that's something of note. I didn't make a point of that. We were very overwhelmed by the number of people who signed up. I think it's testament to the commitment, enthusiasm, passion across, people involved in this, and shows the potential for this to go mainstream. Okay, we're going to move on. We now have Tilly Hansell-Upton, who is a young person, a student, as in part of Teach the Future, the SOS UK movement. Tilly, I'm just going to bring you into the conversation. There you are, Tilly.
Hiya. Right, I'm gonna try and say because everybody's already touched on a lot of things, but I'm gonna try and fill in the gaps where I can. So I would say, okay, so I think from a student point of view, I think one of the key barriers is people trying to find there's a fine line between overwhelming somebody and educating somebody. Um, and I think that is one of the key things, as Charm sort of touched on. And when teachers are sort of expected to do this, but it's not written in the curriculum, you will avoid it because, I mean, our education system's already quite out of date and are very underfunded. So when you're expected to also do all these things, and it is a struggle. But I think specifically from my perspective, the reason that students don't take things on board is because of all the misinformation out there. I think there's many people, like I know that I've spoken to many of my peers at college who think that climate change is just not a very current issue. We're taught at school that climate change is going to be something in the future, something that we are going to, maybe our great grandchildren will have to deal with. And when it's sort of put into that perspective, many people are just like, oh, okay, then I just don't need to think about that. That's not for me to worry about. That's not for me to sort of look into, because sometimes it's easier for somebody to bury their head in the sand than to actually take a stand, especially when we're sort of told all these myths that it's not going to be affecting us. I think also touching on what's previously been said, I think we need to start integrating climate change into the education system. But I think it's such a difficult subject because I know at Teach the Future, one of the key things that we've been doing is the curriculum review and going subject by subject, where can we put climate change in as much as possible. So I was on the economics school, for example, and we spoke with professionals and we were like, okay, where is it that we can do this? Like, and literally every little thing. And I think this has been really helpful. And I think this could be really something that could be very positive. I personally believe that alongside integrating climate change into all these subjects, we should also have it as an option. So if somebody wants to learn more about it and potentially pursue this, I think it should be something that you could really delve into about the different careers that you can get from this and just a variety of opportunities and anything you can do to help. Because then again, sometimes we're told this is a very big issue, and we're overwhelmed and we're scared and we don't know what to do with ourselves. But then we're not really told what we can do about it. We're not really told and you can do X, Y, and Z. It's sort of like this is going to happen whether you like it or not. And when we're so demoralized and so panicked, we're just like, well, we just don't want to think about it, do we? But I think my last point is really, I think it is just going back to the sort of how the education system is. I think really linking to what Jenna said about how outdated our current education system is. And we're sort of taught like we need to, we are just prepared for exams. We're not prepared for life. And we're just we're just told or when it's in secondary school, all we care about is GCSEs. When it's in college, all we care about is A levels. When you're in university, we just want, just get out there. And I think that's sort of why university tends to be the best place to integrate these sort of things, because university is preparing you for life, for real life, more so than just exams. So when people don't take on anything extra, because we're told is that all that matters is, like, for example, in secondary school it was GCSEs. So this extra information, well, it's just unnecessary. That's not going to help me with my GCSEs, and that's all that matters. But yeah, that's my key points. Oh, sorry, just making sure the alarm doesn't go off. But no, that's my key points as to the barriers of climate change.
Thank you so much, Tilly.
It's not mainstream.
No, there was a real wealth. I counted 5 there at least, I think, and there was a good breadth. Yeah, and again, I feel like either so many people have experienced similar things in terms of young people that they are educating, or kind of in their own families in terms of experience. And what you've also done really well there is highlighted some of the great work that has been going on. And again, that's something I think that's a key thread to this, is working out how all these things as a jigsaw fit together, and how collectively maybe then there's a greater outcome from all those things. Well, thank you so much, Tilly. And now we're going to jump over to Megan Wakefield. And Megan is a teacher, but also a parent. And Megan is part of an organisation called Parents for Future. And they have, I mean, there's a wealth of things that Parents for Future have been doing. One at the moment is some of the social media and online campaigning, some of this video content, and some of it's amazing. And I really think that that's an important part of all of this as well. So Megan, I'll hand over to you.
Thank you. I think you're talking about the Our Kids Future campaign. It's been on the side of buses in the Midlands and Yorkshire, and also we've done some online adverts as well. Okay, so following on there, I've got, I think, 3 or 4 points, but they all kind of overlap with each other. And I think that's the thing about all of our points. There's so much integration between them. I'm a teacher in further education, and I won't have that hat on too much at the moment, but I actually think further education is doing loads in this space at the moment, and that's often missing from this jigsaw. So maybe that can be picked up at another time. But as a parent, and I don't pretend to be representative of all parents, but Parents for Future are like the largest UK parent climate campaigning group, and we campaign on lots of different levels in lots of different ways, and we try to be as inclusive as possible. But one of the things that I don't think's come up too much yet is about local community and links with schools and local communities. So I've also got a 9-year-old who's been learning about the Amazon recently. So that was funny to hear about other people's 9-year-olds learning about the Amazon. But when I think about it, a lot of her learning about climate and nature has come through local community events. So I do a lot of creative drawing events and things like that. So I'm quite hooked into local community here in the West Midlands. And around Green Week and those sort of events, there's so much going on. And I think she learns so much through local community like that. And I would love to see lots more links between local community and schools. And you see it in pockets. You see, like, I know people doing Forest School who are also working with local primary schools and things like that. But it is hard to make that links, for bigger events. So you need time, you need funding, you need people who are going to manage those links. You need permission to go off site. You need all sorts of things. So that's something that I would like to see more of. And I know there's groups like Ministry for Eco-Education and Let's Go Zero who are working on that as well. As a parent, a few people have talked about finding your tribe. I think it's really important in terms of our socio-emotional needs, climate anxiety as parents. We experience that, and I think it's really important for us to also be able to find other parents, at the school gates or wherever that feel in a similar way, and finding that through schools could be really good too. So parents working with schools more, and I think having more of that sort of climate and nature thinking coming through parents and linking with schools too. one of the things that I was also thinking about is empowerment and resilience, and looking at the Teach the Future shadow report that's just come out. That really spoke to me, because it talked about kids wanting to learn more about things like climate and nature, but also money, also about politics, also about relevant things that matter to them, that are going to matter to them, that affect our systems. That young I was just thinking about children a part of wider systems. So having education that speaks to that shows them that they're part of a local community, that they're part of a local government, they're part of a national government, that they have lots of different civil society groups, that they have power and agency within that in a really positive way. So that can also help with some of that climate anxiety, I think, and that sense of agency, and also the relevance of learning. So also holding up heroes and heroines. So, teachers being aware of people like Laura Young, of Maya Rose Craig, of young people who are doing amazing things, that can be kind of climate and nature heroes. But that comes from teachers' awareness and teacher education, I think. That teachers can be also taught. I know there's going to be sustainability leads in schools, apparently, but that there's also, in terms of pastoral care, the ability to look after kids as they learn about this sort of things. They're going to learn about mass extinctions, then that's obviously going to have an effect. So how do you then address some of the anxiety that might be thrown up through that? That some of the learning possibly needs to be more relevant in terms of you can take action in simple ways, like the way you consume, in terms of travel, in terms of finance, in terms of media literacy. So all of these things cross curriculum silos. So how can learning cross those curriculum silos and be more integrated like that? Finally, I think thinking about knowledge and skills. So a few speakers have already touched on teacher education. I'm a volunteer for the Carbon Literacy Project, so a volunteer training through that, and they offer brilliant training for further education, for higher education. But it would be great to see that kind of nature literacy and carbon literacy introduced earlier on in teacher training, as I think a few speakers have already touched on. So embedded within that, so teachers have more, feel more empowered, feel more knowledgeable to address these subjects. And finally, something about the government's plans to introduce sustainability leads in schools. They're also talking about working with climate ambassadors. And I think those are going to be volunteers. And I'm thinking, why are they not paid? That's the big, putting my teacher hat on now. Often these roles around sustainability are an extra add-on for teachers that they do above and beyond their regular work. And I think those need to be paid roles and taken really seriously. So that's my 2 pennies worth. Okay, I don't know how long that was.
Well, thank you so much, Megan. I think you're bringing in some really interesting themes again. I mean, one thing you did do was make it quite challenging to pull out the barriers, because you were framing them all as opportunities. Which I know when we first sort of set this discussion up, we realised that we don't want to focus on the negative, but we do need to acknowledge them and then go straight on to how can we turn that into an opportunity? And you've done that wonderfully in terms of recognising where either things are already happening or where there's the potential to really focus more attention. I'm sure Alison her ears will have pricked up when you were talking there about teacher training as well. And I know the IOE have got some really great things that they've been testing and developing. And I guess the question we're all asking is, well, how do we make that then mainstream so that every single teacher experiences that and does that? Okay, well, thank you so much, Megan. We're now going to move on to Dr. Poppy Gibson. And Dr. Poppy Gibson is based at the Open University with a focus on primary education, as well as having been a primary teacher myself. And now, Poppy, I'm going to bring you in to the discussion.
Thanks, Paul. And thanks, Megan. And hi, everybody. I feel like an imposter after following such amazing, knowledgeable speakers. And I'm conscious of time, so I'm going to bring to you 4 barriers. I'm sure we all could have brought many more, but 4 things. I'm going to try to be a little bit spicy with it as well. I'm a lecturer in education, as Paul said. I'm in my 19th year of teaching. But yes, I've now moved from being a primary school teacher to working at university level. So I work with adult learners, and it's been amazing, the things that I've pulled out from all of the talks we've heard already. There's definitely some crossover in what we all feel is the way forward. So the 4 barriers for me. The first one is definitely around anxiety, and something we're talking about is eco-anxiety, can also be known as eco-distress, climate anxiety. And you've all touched on this, but I think when we're seeing students coming up to university with more anxiety than ever, I've had students message me on the day of a lecture saying they just can't come in, they're too anxious to sit in a lecture theatre. How are we then going to have a conversation about the fact that our world is, being destroyed, on top of them trying to manage their own daily anxiety? So I think that's the main problem we've got at the moment, is many people just trying to get through the day. So we don't want to add, as many of you have said, as Tilly said, around overwhelm of those eco issues. The second one is the accountability of exams. Again, I think I saw Paul or someone pulled that out in the chat around our school's accountability to exams and results. Anecdotally, I know an amazing woman called Amanda, a Good Mood creative, who runs eco-anxiety workshops. Now, Amanda had won funding to take these into secondary schools for free. And I could not believe when she told me that all the schools were saying no. She was offering to run eco-anxiety workshops for young people, and schools are saying no, there wasn't time in the weekly timetable. And I think that gives us an idea of where schools' priorities are at, and it's not the teacher's fault. The third one, and I want to elaborate on these last 2, so it's why I sped through the first 2. I said I was going to get spicy. I want to talk to you about what I think number 3, in my opinion, the third barrier is our fear of death. And I think our fear of death is a big driver behind our unwillingness to talk about climate change in our educational spaces. And I'll give you an example. A couple of days ago, I'm a mother of 3 as well. And my middle child, Griff, he's 10. Lots of us with children around that 9-10 transition. He's 10, he's obsessed with space, everything space. He's also very philosophical, and we often talk about death and life and what comes next. And when I was tucking him into bed, he said to me, "Mum, do you know in about 5 billion years, our sun will start dying? Our sun's going to die." Children often bring these things up at bedtime. And my instant response was, "Oh my goodness, that's like so dark to think about before sleep." But we actually sat with it and we thought about what is 5 billion years? But clearly it's on his mind as a child. And some of you were saying about grandparents, Tilly was saying about what will our grandparents deal with? I mean, that's certainly grandparents in 5 billion years, but it's on his radar. And I think part of the issue here is because we fear death, we don't want to think about dying. We don't want to think about what's going to happen to our planet in 50 years when we'll be dead, because it's accepting our own mortality. I should have mentioned the disclaimer. My research is around well-being, mental health, and I talk a lot about grief and death. Another anecdote, again, we are storytellers as teachers. I often talk at conferences, and normally my rooms are full and it's lovely with so many people coming to listen to my talks. When I ran a parallel talk last year on death, I ran a session on death and grief and how we talk to children about death. I had 8 people show up, and not even double digits wanted to come and talk about that one. But why are we not talking to children about death at an age-appropriate level? I've written a children's book on death, and I talk frequently about death. Not talking about death doesn't mean it won't happen. And I think I'm seeing the same barrier with climate education. Not talking about climate decaying and the world heating up and all the issues around sustainability isn't going to make them go away, but it means we don't have to think about them right now. And when we're trying to be mindful and present, the last thing we want is to be thinking about what our world will look like in 50 years' time. So I think fear of death is a big one for me. We don't want to think about the fact we will die, the earth will exist without us, whatever state it's in. And thank you everyone for all the comments. I'm going to scroll back in a minute. Thanks, Becky. So fear of death, definitely. And my fourth and final one is ethics and ethical transparency. Again, you can see I'm trying to be spicy and come from a new angle, but ethics is a big one. Here's an example. I'm sure we're all talking about artificial intelligence and how much we love artificial intelligence, all the cool things it can do. Hopefully you're on that journey with me, because it can do really cool stuff. So we're talking with our students at university about what can you do with AI? What prompts can you put into an AI platform to generate something cool, to generate a lesson plan, to generate a stimulus for creative writing? But how often are we telling them how much water it uses for them to do that? So I had a quick look online, and did you know, just to put between 5 to 50 prompts in an AI generator, many are available, it can take approximately 500 milliliters, so half a liter of water, just for you to get those 5 little creative writing prompts. And when you look into it, and as you go down that rabbit hole, as we all do, we're interested in something. I was looking at the water consumption of these AI platforms, because the servers are getting so hot, they need cooling down. The amount of water, I read a statistic that when they looked into the development of ChatGPT, the global water consumption had gone up 34% in a year from 2021 to 2022. That was in a study at University of California. Wow. And we know water is one of our most precious sources. Yes, true. Some of you saying around AI is everywhere. So when it's everywhere, but we're not teaching the ethical choices to our students. So we're saying, you know, have a go on an AI platform, see what comes up, but we're not giving them the ethical information behind that. You can do this, but did you know that the half an hour you spend on that AI platform is going to use a liter of water? It helps them make a more ethical choice. When I was working recently at a different university, very close to the university was Primark. And I can tell you now that nearly every time I would teach after lunch, my students would come home with massive brown paper bags full of cheap clothing. And again, we don't always talk to students about the ethical issues behind what they're doing. But I used to pull them up on it and say, that's a lot of shopping. And so one day we actually just dug into this, and we spent the first 5 minutes of our lecture looking at our clothing labels, and we all peeped in our clothes and looked where our clothes were made, and we looked on the map, and we thought about some of these barriers and issues that are bigger than just our easy daily life. So I feel like, before I go off on a tangent, hopefully you agree with me, there's something there in our fear of death, our unwillingness to accept the ethics behind what we're doing, and all the other stuff I said. But it's a pleasure to be here. And I hope that made sense, Paul.
Yeah, no, it did so much, Poppy, and I'm glad you brought up those themes towards the end. I think it was recently that the Department for Education there was a big, particularly on social media, a big publicity push on AI and how it was going to solve, you know, teachers' problems. And there was absolutely no recognition of the environmental impact of all of this technology, you know, and you'd think, okay, well, maybe you'd get that right before you then start pushing it as a tool. But yeah, I know that's something we're really keen to do, is to say to people, actually recognize the amount of energy that's used in a chat GPT search and all these other things, and be conscious of that. And I think what you've identified there is that it's not the mainstream are not thinking that. And what we need to do is, you know, most people on this call will already be in that place where they're conscious of that and thinking about it. Well, how do we bring that mentality and thinking to the mainstream? Yeah, well, thank you so much. I haven't even touched on the death one as well. And I think, again, that's that subconscious element, and a really fundamental one as well. What I would say is all of these strands, we're going to be able to have an opportunity to talk about in far more detail when we go into breakout rooms. And again, maybe I should have referenced that at the beginning. We want everyone's sort of discussion and ideas, as much as we will be collating the chat feature on this. We've got another feature for that as well. So one last speaker, we've got Siobhan. Right, let me just find Dr. Siobhan Currie. And Siobhan is from the Climate Psychology Alliance. And I'm going to bring her in now. Siobhan, you've got the last sort of 5 minutes.
Hi, everybody. Yeah, I'm very grateful to have the last 5 minutes, because a lot of the things that I was going to mention have been kind of gently introduced. So that's really great. And I think I'm here to sort of give a bit of a psychological perspective on this. And I'm glad that some people have already mentioned Some things, like the thought of the overwhelm, the distress that you might be faced with when you raise these issues. I kind of think of this as the climate science versus the climate silence, which I'm sure we've all kind of raised climate in our talks with our families and friends and colleagues, and been faced with that kind of, oh yeah, great, and carry on, change the subject, or just a blank face. And it was interesting, Paul, that you said, I thought that was a very good question. Why is this area not got the energy and the enthusiasm from some people that other areas have? And I guess that's why climate psychology exists, because we are trying to work out why we're in this situation, and why this sort of socially constructed silence and denial and paralysis is really leading us to this dreadful future. And I'm so glad you mentioned, our fear of death, but the fear of sort of general collapse and the future that we're facing is huge, Poppy. So thank you for being brave enough to introduce that. So I thought a lot of people might talk about what was happening in schools. So I thought I might just sort of bring a few more sort of broader context issues, because this sort of generalized climate denial is everywhere. Business as usual. When you turn on the TV or listen to the radio or read the papers, you're thinking, is it me? Am I going crazy? But because we're all people, everybody, educators and people in schools and wherever we are, we're all people. So we're all going to be experiencing our own sort of responses from our nervous system, the defense mechanisms that I really wanted to sort of throw in here. These are natural responses, and there's a lot of thinking traps and cognitive kind of things that mess with our heads in terms of how we respond to this. And if we look at like Louise Edgington's work on the thinking traps that are around and how we so easily fall into them, and why wouldn't we? It's much harder to face it, and it's such a challenge to bring this into the classroom. And a few people have mentioned that, and Cham's introduction, talking about how his students arrive and the distress they feel and how important it is. This is my sort of basic main barrier. Sorry, I haven't put them into points, Paul, but my main thesis really is that unless we address this emotional aspect of climate education and we allow for the truth and this experiencing of these emotions and the processing through the inner work that we would all need to do, it will never become mainstream. We won't sort of get over those barriers, because it's just the defenses are just going to become stronger. And you see that in those conversations I'm sure that you've had with people, where it almost turns into a kind of polarizing argument, because their defenses and their biases and their sort of ways of dealing with this become stronger. There's just too many of these defenses, there's loads and loads, and I can't go into all of them. But another thing that I think hasn't quite come out is something about power as well. There's a friend of mine, a clinical psychologist, Gareth Morgan, in the Climate Psychology Alliance, and he's used something called the power threat meaning framework around, you can look this up, it's very interesting, around what's happening with in climate psychology. And I've been thinking about that in relation to schools, and I think it's very interesting. Who has the power in schools? Where does the power lie, and how have people got that power? You know, if you're, and we have heard this a lot on the climate courage campaigns from the Climate Majority Project, we've heard this on some of the calls. If you're the sort of one teacher in a school, you know, what are the threats to you of raising this issue? You know, you could easily become pretty isolated. You could feel alienated. You know, you're the only person trying to get this talked about on the curriculum. So you're not going to do that unless you find your allies and you feel that you have the strength to kind of have that agency and address that power that exists. And it, you know, most of our schools are state institutions, and you know, power is everywhere, and a lot of teachers in the classroom may not feel, for various reasons, that they are empowered to do this. So that's another area that, you know, I think people might find interesting in terms of why we're not at the mainstream at the moment. So yeah, there are quite a few different approaches in climate psychology, but there is a lot of agreement that due to some of the work on grief that's been mentioned, and trauma and abuse, that we have to process and experience these emotions in order to treat ourselves with compassion, treat others with compassion, and move towards being activated. I think both Cham and Tilly spoke about this, to be motivated to, you know, do your work and take your part and do what you feel is something, whether it is something in your community or something with your friends that you can do towards changing situation. And, you know, I just felt for you there, Tilly, when you said the overwhelm and the distress that you feel when you're faced with the truth about the situation, and then you're not, you don't have the space to talk about what to do about that. And so, you know, naturally, your natural defense mechanism is to avoid it and shut it down. So I think any climate education, you know, yes, let's have climate education, but let's please have it so that it is a psychologically informed approach, because I think we'll get much further much quicker. So thank you.
Yeah, thank you so much, Siobhan. I think again that's another really, you've emphasized something, but also brought in some new bits there in terms of that wider the processing of the emotional. Okay. Thank you so much for everyone who's still on the call at the moment. I appreciate we are I don't know, we're an hour and a half in, maybe an hour in. Please do stick around for the next 10-15 minutes, because this is the moment where we want to sort of really give everyone a chance to be able to talk, and we can move into breakout rooms. What we've done for that is created some instructions so that each breakout room can autonomously kind of guide themselves. I think we're going to give people 10 minutes for this, and I'll share the link now. There's a link I wanted to say. I wanted to just bring this back together, say thank you for everyone's generosity, you know, the panelists, but also everyone who's taken part, shared a view, you know, listened to other people. It's all very kind of you. I think we should also recognize this as a moment in the process, that coming together with the variety of people, I think we could always say, you know, why is this person not here, or why is this not bigger, and all those sorts of things, and you know, those things may well come, but to recognize that yeah, this is an important part of that process. The other thing I wanted to say as well is we're not going to be able to solve this now. We're not going to be able to even summarize what has been discussed. We will try and move to that in what we collate and send to everyone after this event. So we are going to go through everything that's come through. I mean, the other bit that I haven't mentioned is we did a pre-event survey as well. We had about 50 responses, again, with lots of similar themes, but we'll compile that along with everything that everyone has said, both in the chat and in the groups, and get that out to people. In terms of moving forward as well, Les.
Well, I was just going to say we're not moving forward in a vacuum. You know, we've got the curriculum and assessment review, we've got the National Climate Education Action Plan, we've got loads of other people working on this in this space who may not be here today. So I think, as Paul says, this is part of a process, and we need to ask participants to sort of reach out and make the connections with the other groups that they're linked into. I'm also thinking particularly about head teachers, because I think head teachers are key. They're key voices that need to be heard in this. And, you know, whether we're parents or teachers, or we work as academics or within, you know, different organisations, campaigners, everybody can probably find a head teacher that they've got a connection to somehow. So I think I'd make a request for people to, you know, to reach out and make that personal connection, you know, invite head teachers into this discussion space.
I think, Les, as well, a theme that you were really keen to emphasize is, you know, we're here because we care and we are doing so much in our spaces. And what we wanted to also do was breed a sense of sort of mutual support and say that we even though, you know, it may be a governor and a teacher and someone else for another aspect of education, we've got this mutual shared goal that we collectively can achieve. And it's through that collective action at the systemic level that we can really make this go mainstream, and that's the bit that we're reaching for and really trying to achieve. And yeah, as Les said, so much that is going on that isn't even represented here, and that's something we can try and better share. And I guess the other bit, sorry, Les, was that we didn't want to hyper individualize this. You know, we're not asking people to do more themselves within their settings. It's about that sort of shared aspect as well, and feeling like you can reach out and speak to someone else, and that there is this other great thing going on and you can benefit from that, and then that can lead to something else and lead to something else. The other bit I wanted to mention as well is we were looking for physical opportunities to bring people together in smaller conversations maybe as well. So I'm sure you're all aware of, within your respective areas, of moments. One of them might be the NEU have got their annual conference coming up in April. We have a space there that we are bringing people together for these conversations, but we wanted to ask you, is there somewhere that you know of within your sphere that this sort of conversation can be replicated, and we can bring together other voices and then bring that in to the kind of wider aspects as well. So please do, if you know of any physical opportunity to bring people together, you mention that, and we would love to hear of it. And as we said as well, we are definitely having another call like this in September to sort of check in and see where people are at. And I guess, as Les has mentioned, we'll be further along in some of those journeys, particularly around the curriculum and assessment review. I know that there is an impending interim report and process, which I'm sure other people on the call kind of much more tapped into. But again, that's something that would be great to share so that we can all look for an opportunity to collectively sort of put our weight behind. And again, that's something that we're hoping might not come out now and might come out in future sort of conversations or future emails or however that communication might happen, that we begin to galvanize on these sorts of threads that we can collectively support. If anyone has anything else they wanted to say,
Hey, is there anything from the Education Climate Coalition?
No, I think we've just got so many brilliant notes and ideas we need to go away and collate, don't we? And totally echo what Paul's saying. See you in September. Thank you so much. And also to add to what Les is saying, heads, you know, school leaders, you know, people who work in multi-academy trusts, local authorities, governors, let's just deliberately build a network. And thanks so much, guys. What an inspirational set of speakers. Thank you so much for coming to us tonight. And thanks to Paul, as always, for herding the cat so beautifully.
I will be sending out the recording, so don't worry.
You're going to edit that bit out.
Yes. Cheers. Thank you, everyone.
Thank you so much. Bye-bye.